Hello and welcome to the fifth installment of AppBuilder Office Hours. My name is TJ VanToll. I work as a developer advocate for Telerik, and I'm being joined today by my colleagues Michael Crump and Sam Basu. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at, and thanks for joining us. My name is Sam Basu, and all three of us are developer advocates for Telerik. It's, I guess, something a little we are proud of. Telerik has one customer, and that's the developer, and all of us speak to developers, and that's why we're here today. Michael.
Yes, hey, I'm Michael Crump. You probably have seen me at some sort of conferences or maybe read a blog post or two of mine. So I'm kind of a little bit all over the space. I love mobile, I love web, and even desktop development. So excited to be here today.
Sam, we're talking basically native web and hybrid today. You want to set the stage for our discussion a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's 2015, guys, and I think we have been doing mobile for, what, like 7 years now? The fact that we are still talking about this dilemma of whether we do native, mobile web, hybrid, or something else, to me, this reads as if we don't have a clear answer, and I think that is the case. I mean, there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that fixes everything. The answer truly depends. So there are pros and cons of every approach, and I think we are going to easily go through the hour talking about all of these approaches. So let me kind of maybe back up and think about the kind of ways you can do mobile today. And to me, there are four primary ways that I can think of. The lowest hanging fruit is often the mobile web, where you just make your website work responsively on a mobile device. And believe it or not, that is a very legit strategy for a lot of people and for a lot of apps. So that's mobile web. Now, on the flip side are native apps. And these are native apps for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, if you consider those to be the three primary platforms. Native apps are great, and I'm sure all three of us are big fans of native apps. Best close to the metal performance, best possible user experience, and so on. But it comes at a price, right, as we all know, because those are three very different platforms and very different skill sets for a single developer to do all of that stuff. So I think whenever we can, if resources and time permit, I think all of us agree that, I mean, native is awesome. Somewhere in between are hybrid apps, and I think this is where TJ can weigh in a lot. To me, hybrid apps are where you reuse your web skills, your HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript to make mobile apps which are cross-platforms. That's the huge benefit. You have, or you shoot for that single code base, and you have your app run on every mobile platform. Now, maybe we began with a little bit of hesitation with hybrid apps. I mean, is it going to be performant? Would I really get that single code base? But I think as TJ is going to come in and talk about it, we are way past those hurdles. So it is absolutely an awesome strategy to go, especially if you want to go cross-platform. And then somewhere between native and hybrid are these approaches where you kind of go semi-native and you try to use the language of your choice, like C# if you want to compile that through Xamarin and run it natively on every platform. And something that we are very proud of and we've been working on for the last few months is native script, which is where you write JavaScript to make your cross-platform mobile apps. So lots of choices as developers. Let's kind of talk about some of the pros and cons and where things fit, right? So I know Michael is a huge fan of native apps. So Michael, let's talk about why you should be doing native apps for iOS and Android.
Thanks. Yeah, Sam, that's a question that I've heard a lot of people ask me. Again, as I kind of always start answering that question, I always go back and say, hey, it depends on the team, like you were talking about just a moment ago. So I've met teams, in the past that they really didn't have a very strong web background. So they had no clue, how to debug JavaScript in Chrome. And I know that's kind of amazing to say, in 2015, but this was some of the things that I've seen maybe in the last couple of years. And they may have like a handful of developers, that they were into the web, but the vast majority of the developers that they had on staff, they were very efficient in Java, and they were efficient in C#. And yes, I have met the few that were efficient in Objective-C. And so what I have found with my experiences is that these people that already have the experience using Java, using C Sharp, or even Objective-C, they can get a Windows Universal app or an Android app or even an iOS app up and running pretty fast with reusing their existing skill sets because they're already used to the underlying languages that those apps are built upon. The next thing is you have to take a look at, what's the most important thing for your app. If you really need that maximum reach spanning all three platforms, then obviously this kind of goes back to where a hybrid app is going to be one of the main things that's going to allow you to do some of the reusing or sharing of the same code. Obviously, if you only care to target Android, which has the most market share worldwide, I think there was 84% the last time that I looked, and that number seems big, and that's the latest number. And you have a team of Java devs, then you're going to want to go ahead and utilize that team, and maybe there's some richness of animations that maybe hybrid may or may not be able to keep up with, that native gives you, as well as some lower level hardware access. So we've seen, even like with Cordova and things like that, there's obviously a plug-in markets and things that exist, but I found that with native, you really don't ever have to worry about, well, am I going to be able to get access to this lower level hardware device? So the next thing that kind of keys in with that is the difficulty. How difficult is it for this individual developer that to do both iOS and native Android development? And I would answer that by saying, I wouldn't say that it's difficult, but I would say that it's very, very time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Besides learning Xcode and what I would call the never-changing Android Studio, because Android Studio is changing almost daily according to which build you're on, you're going to have to learn things like storyboards if you're using iOS, and you're either going to have to really learn both Objective-C and Swift for iOS. And Android, you're going to be working with XML. And if you're not a fan of XML, you're not going to be very happy there. And obviously, Java is the language of choice there. So there's several things to consider there, and the other thing that you would want to consider is that you can't share code between an iOS and Android native project. So sure, you can have that backend service, that returns maybe a JSON file or collects data or whatever. That one can be, absolutely, the same running on a server somewhere. But the code that's actually inside of your app is going to be different, at least slightly different, because you're using a different language. So that's just a couple of things, to keep in mind. Since I know that you've been doing quite a bit of work with Windows apps, can you tell us kind of where we stand right now with native Windows apps, and really kind of what's going on with Windows Universal apps? And I hear that there's a big event coming up about Windows 10.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we go into Windows, what I heard you say was, if you have the skills, by all means go native. If you have the resources, go native. It's going to be a little bit of work, but you will get the most maybe bang for your work. But I guess to me, as an individual, yes, we'll have to learn 3 different platforms: Objective-C and Swift for iOS, Java for Android, and C# XAML for Windows, or maybe even HTML JavaScript for Windows. But to me, the bigger challenge is for enterprises, because now you're talking about maintaining 3 different teams with kind of varying skill sets. So I think that's where folks are trying to really strategize, like, what should we do with mobile so that we can reuse most of the expertise that we have in-house, plus be able to target on platforms. So let me answer the Windows question. So yes, you're right. We are doing this today live, but then next week, which is January 21st, we should all keep a little bit of time in hand. At 9 a.m. Pacific time, Microsoft is going to be unveiling Windows 10, which is supposed to be the next generation of operating system from Windows. This is something they're being a little secretive about, and that's understandable. In fact, a lot of insiders like us have really no information about Windows 10.
So what does an unveil mean? Is it like a beta, or like what exactly will they be showing?
Potentially. I mean, they'll get up on stage and show it to the world with all of the press present, but essentially they might be dropping a beta or an alpha for everybody else to consume.
And that's what everybody has their fingers crossed about.
Yeah. And this is a big deal because Microsoft, I mean, as we all know, Windows Phone has maybe a shrinking share of the marketplace, but it's a well-designed OS. Windows 8 was their big push to make one OS that runs on every device. So compared to iPhone, or I guess Apple and Google, who have different OSs for desktop versus mobile, Microsoft said, we're going to have one OS that runs everywhere, and people are going to be just flipping a little bit between touch mode and non-touch mode. So whether Windows 8 was well accepted or not, that's a whole other story. I think it has been on some aspects. Maybe enterprises have been a little hesitant. So they are actually putting a lot of their eggs in one basket with Windows 10. So the point with Windows 10 is you're going to see a convergence of operating systems. This is the big OSG, the operating systems group at Microsoft. So think about this. Your Windows, which is your OS that runs on your laptop, desktop, and so on, your Windows Phone, your Xbox, and everything that runs Windows today, all the IoT, the Internet of Things devices, embedded Windows, everything that has ever run Windows is going to be running Windows 10. So it's one thing that runs everywhere. So it is a big deal, and so we'll see what the future holds for us.
I think a lot of people is very interested, Sam, in at least seeing kind of what that next version of Windows Phone and what Windows 10 would look like on the phone.
Yeah.
I know that there's been lots of talks, even recently at CodeMash about Windows Phone 8 and some of the things they liked and some of the things they didn't like. I found overall most people loved the OS, but they were really looking forward to what was going to be announced and what's going to be coming with Windows 10.
Right.
So is there so Windows Phone 8 is kind of like the same version number as Windows 8, so will it be like a Windows Phone 10? How does that even work?
It's Windows 10 that's running on your phone. So it's just Windows 10 that runs everywhere. Why they skipped Windows 9?
They skipped version numbers.
Yeah, that's a whole speculative thing. And maybe like Windows 8 had some remnants of negativity that they didn't want to take over. But this is what it means for developers. We have been told this over and over again. Microsoft came up with this thing, I think it was last build, or maybe the build before, where they talked about universal apps. And this is what Michael was referring to. So for Microsoft developers, we have been told, go write universal apps today. And by universal apps, what Microsoft means is really universal within the Microsoft realm. And these are apps which run on Windows Phone, which is the smaller form factor of a mobile device, and Windows 8 or 8.1, which is the tablets, the laptops, the desktops, everything that runs Windows. And the idea here is you are going to share as much code as you can. I mean, not just your backend services, not just your business logic, but you should be able to share even your UI logic. So the way you render controls, there are some shared controls which maybe they render a little adaptively based on whether you're on a phone or on a tablet or on a laptop, and you will be able to share your UI layer between a phone form factor and a tablet or a laptop form factor. So this is the Windows Universal Promise, and we are told that that promise carries over into Windows 10. So if you are looking to make Windows 10 apps for tomorrow, I think you're best served writing universal apps today.
And let me just add to that business logic as well for the universal apps. There's some derivatives that you can use to check to see if it's a Windows Phone or if it's a Windows RT app, and it will execute that code obviously from that project. So typically when you launch or you create a universal app, you get 3 different projects. You have a shared project, you have a Windows Phone 8.1, and then you have a Windows 8.1 app. So, and then with that shared folder, that's where you can share all the assets like images and things like that that Sam was talking about, as well as the UI.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as TJ is realizing, we both love native stuff and we love to talk. So let's have TJ chime in here. So tell us about hybrid apps, man. Where are we with hybrid apps? Where was the promise? Are there things you cannot do in a hybrid app? Where is the tooling? Where's the performance? Where do we stand today?
Yeah, and so I think this kind of goes back to what's you guys were both talking about, that it always depends, right? The appropriate fit for your project, and especially on the skill set your team already has. And the big draw of hybrid development is that you're writing with web technology. So if you personally or your team has a lot of experience with web tech, which a whole lot of companies do because a whole lot of companies have a web presence, then a Cordova app can make a whole lot of sense. Now, like hybrid historically, like if you go a few years back, kind of earned this bad rap for being slow or not being performant or clunky or whatever negative connotation you want to use. It got a bad rap, and there were a lot of reasons for it, some of which were true. The browsers of a few years ago were, in many senses, really bad. The Android 2.3 browser was particularly horrific, just slow, buggy, and horrible to work with. But these phones, like the newer phones, have gotten better browsers. The performance has improved in the hybrid world a lot. So I really think it's more of a viable target than what was available a few years ago. And I still think hybrid apps are a pretty good fit for any company or any person that wants to have an app, like has some reason to build something more than the web, because we really haven't talked about the web yet either. But if you want to build a website, but you have some reason that you need to have an app, whether that's App Store presence, you want people to be able to find you in the iOS App Store, Google Play, Windows Phone Store, whether that's push notifications, you want people to get push, or just really any device capabilities, hybrid lets you bridge that world. You're basically building something that could live on the web, but uses Cordova, has this ability to access native features as you need them. So I think it
So
makes. Go ahead, Sam.
no, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is really if you spend a little bit of energy to make a nice hybrid app where you plan the UX, you plan for performance, and I mean, you can screw yourself up in any platform doing native as well. So if you put in your due diligence, the average consumer of your app, whether it be a B2C app or even a line of business app, they will not notice any difference whatsoever between a hybrid app and a native app running on a newer device.
Yep, and I mean, don't make any mistakes. Like hybrid apps aren't going to be as fast as native apps. Like native apps are running closer to the metal. With native, you're going to get, at least from a UI perspective, your sample UIs, or your simple UIs, I should say, are going to work fine. They're going to perform well by default. And with hybrid, you have to work, I shouldn't say work harder, but you have to know what you're doing a little bit more. But what's helping is that we have a lot more options from a framework and library perspective to kind of give you those same defaults for you. So at Telerik, we have Kinda UI Mobile, and there's other libraries as well. There's Ionic, which is getting pretty popular. There's Onsen. There's a few other ones as well. And what those libraries do for you is they kind of take these best practices in order to help you build a fast hybrid app, and kind of giving you those as defaults so that you don't have to think about those problems as long as you code to the appropriate APIs.
Sure. So I mean, you mentioned like reusing your web skills, and that kind of brings me back to kind of maybe where even I started with mobile web, right? And this is kind of where we suddenly saw that a lot of our usage for maybe even websites was coming from mobile devices. So why not have it? Why not have the website be responsive and adaptive to the mobile device that you're on? And I still think, I mean, it is a legitimate strategy for a certain type of apps. I mean, if you're looking for the lowest hanging fruit, if you have just a simple line of business app, consider like my local area restaurant, where all I'm doing is looking up a menu, figuring out their phone number and things like that. For some simple things like that, I think mobile web still has a very good. I mean, it is a good choice, and there are frameworks like Bootstrap or even like ASP.NET in the .NET world, which will allow you to build responsive mobile websites.
Yeah, and I view the web as basically the default. Like you should always start with the mobile web and really only move on when you have a need to. Because as soon as you go the native route, native or hybrid, once you're talking about having apps out there, you're getting yourself into a lot more work, a lot more hassle, a lot more maintenance to deal with that, because you're dealing with iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, and there's all these weird processes associated with them that if you can avoid that, like if you don't have any need for it, the web is super simple.
Yeah.
And I see it as absolute reach. The reach of just mobile web is amazing because it's going to run on, next to any browser. And I noticed that locally around here, obviously in the Birmingham area, we have a lot of healthcare, jobs and a lot of, facilities. And I've noticed that several of the hospitals around here are using mobile web as an option because there's something like maybe checking the status of how full is an emergency room. Do you need to go to this one, this hospital, or can you go, a mile over to another hospital that has, an emergency room that has an availability, kind of according, obviously, if your arm's cut off, maybe, whichever one you need to go to, but according to the acuity, it could help you decide which one. And they were just using mobile web, and at the end of the day, it would work in absolutely anything, pretty much any phone that's been built in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's the big lure. But I mean, if I may play like devil's advocate here, we all know mobile web works and it works on every phone. But the two downsides that I see, like if my local restaurant suddenly became a chain and they became more popular, people will start looking for the app in the App Store, which is what TJ was referring to, right? So there is something to be said about having a presence in the Google, Apple, or Microsoft app stores, because it immediately gives you recognition that, hey, I'm there, I'm a legit app in the App Store. Maybe you can also throw in some monetization, be it like a paid app, be it advertising or in-app purchases. You immediately have monetization. And the other big thing with mobile web that you cannot do is sometimes, unless you're doing something very simple, you are a little limited by what the web is, and you're really running inside of a browser, and you do not have access to all of the native and the hardware things, the device options that you get out of a mobile device. So I think that's where hybrid takes the next huge leap to make you feel that you can do everything on a hybrid that you can on a native. So, and that's through plugins, right? So TJ, tell us about plugins. Where are we with hybrid plugins?
Yeah, I'll start by giving an example here. So I used to work for a hosting company, and so we were poised with basically this decision. Well, we want an app. Do we want to build web native hybrid? And the specific use case there is interesting because I think it's my go-to example for the best scenario to build a hybrid app, because the hosting company, we had a lot of web skills. We had a number of web developers in-house, zero iOS or Android or Windows Phone C# skills. But the app itself, we ran a poll that said, like, basically asked our customers to say, if we had an app, what would you want it to do? And the number one thing people said is they wanted push notifications, because they're a hosting company. They really don't want to hear from us unless something is wrong, in which case they want to hear from us immediately. And so, like, that's a perfect use case for a hybrid app, because you're not going to be able to do that with the mobile web. And it's really kind of silly to go down the route of building a completely native app for that sort of thing, because like dealing with the hassle of 3 different platforms. So that's a perfect scenario to build a hybrid app. And you were talking plugins, Sam, and really what plugins or Cordova plugins do is act as that bridge layer between the Java or your JavaScript web code and the native layer. And so I mentioned earlier, like hybrid apps, you have access to the metal, you have access to all the native stuff. And in Cordova land, the way that access actually works from a code perspective is you use Cordova to act as that bridge, to say, here's the JavaScript API I want to call, and here's how this translates into Objective-C or Java or C# over on the native side. And so at Telerik, we have a plugins marketplace that you could check out, plugins.telerik.com. Cordova maintains one at plugins.cordova.io. I believe that's the right URL. But these are plugins that the community manages. The Telerik marketplace, it's a marketplace that we manage, and plugins that we manage that help make that access as easy as possible. So with the push example, for instance, there's a push plugin. If you go to Telerik, plugins.telerik.com and search for push, you'll find our push notifications plugin. And really, with that plugin installed, you have a simple API that you can use to hook into our backend services offering and use that to send push notifications. And we try to make that as easy as possible so that you don't have to go digging into Objective-C code to figure out how to handle a push notification, and instead just get a JavaScript method that you use to handle it.
And push notifications are hard, and they're different on every platform.
Yes,
So,
they are.
So I actually did this morning. I mean, I went looking for the plugins marketplace and saw what's out there. Really, I mean, just about everything you can do on native, you can do on hybrid apps, right? And
Yep.
I mean, if you find something there where it's like a very platform-specific thing that's nowhere else, I mean, could you still like do something custom?
Yeah, so you could absolutely build your own Cordova plugin. Our plugins marketplace too, and I could probably bring this up.
The social sharing is a great example of where you can pull out the native, like Twitter or whatever. There's an example that's in our plugins market, TJ, I think you used in one of your apps, and that's actually Java and C# code.
So here's our plugins marketplace, plugins.telerik.com, and so we have we're going to start to write up some documentation on how you can build these sort of things yourself. If you're a person that writes plugins too, we've got a way that you can submit plugins to us now that appear in the marketplace. This link here is what I send people to a lot. This takes us to our user voice portal, where we have basically a place that you can suggest plugins. So if you need a plugin for your app and you head to our site, you don't see anything, you can head here and request it, or you can vote on it. Like you see, there's somebody wants a map plugin, a geofence plugin. And we use this to help prioritize what we make available in the marketplace. But writing a Cordova plugin, it's a little bit of work to figure out the nuances of how Cordova works. It takes a little bit of time, but once you get it down, it's not that bad. And it's something that you're just writing the native code to do this one particular function, which I think most developers can wrap their heads around within a limited amount of time. You can read API documentation and figure out how to call something, and it takes a lot less time than if you were to be developing the entire app in that language.
Yeah. So, I mean, while we're on the hybrid land, I mean, we'll have Michael back with his native love. But let me talk about one more pain point. I feel for lots of mobile developers, a big challenge is, where do I test my app, right? I'm writing code. Show me how I can easily test my app. And there are several things you can do. There is a simulation, there is an emulation, and then there is an actual device deployment. And actually, today is January 15th, and if you check the Telerik developer network at developer.telerik.com, one of our colleagues, Jen Looper, she wrote a brilliant article on how simulation and emulation are different and what are your choices. So to me, tooling has come a long way. Inside of our Telerik platform, Telerik App Builder, yep, that's the one, TJ. So there are easy options where you can do some simulations on the web. There's an in-browser simulator for iOS, Android, Windows, and a whole lot of other Android devices. And there are native simulators for OS X and Windows, right? So, TJ, anything else on the simulation emulation front? Looks like we are coming a long way.
Yeah, it's a lot better than it used to be. When I tell the story of when I started doing hybrid dev, I would just run alert statements because I didn't really know what else to do to debug things. And it's not just the third-party tools. So you have things like AppBuilder, you have things like Microsoft is doing some innovation within Visual Studio as well. So you have these third parties that are starting to innovate and make some of this tooling more directly available. But even just the browser vendors itself, as of iOS 5, so like maybe that's probably 3 years ago now, you had the ability to use the Safari web inspector on your app. So even simple things like it makes JavaScript debugging available. It makes like console.logs. You can see those on your app running remotely. So apps running actually on your physical device, like an actual true .ipa or .apk, .xap file. And Chrome has added the same thing. As of Android 4.4, you can use Chrome, desktop Chrome, to actually debug your hybrid apps, which to me is like the single most valuable thing that's been made available for hybrid devs, just because I spend so much of my time in the Chrome dev tools anyways.
That opens up like your network stack, your CSS, your JavaScript, everything for debug, right?
Yep. Memory tooling, if you're having memory problems in your app, like there's a whole ton of stuff in there. And I find that stuff, even though it's specific to Chrome, I find it works fairly well cross-platform in that, like, if you're having a performance or debugging issue, like if you take the time to debug it in Chrome, usually that can help go to, like, it shows on your other platforms as well. That's not always true. Sometimes you have to dig into the specific platforms, but I find that I can do most of my debugging there. Between things like the AppBuilder Simulator and having the Chrome dev tools available, I feel like it's night and day versus what it was just 2 years ago, and it's getting a lot better all the time. Actually, Windows Phone is the one kind of holdout for remote debugging. Like, what I'm really waiting for is the ability to spin up IE and be able to look at my Windows Phone app the same way you can now do with Safari and iOS and Android and Chrome.
Maybe we'll be hearing about that January 21st.
Yes. Probably running the same version of Windows consistently can't hurt that, I imagine.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get the whole simulation thing, and I mean, emulators have also come a long way. I mean, if you have like native emulators for Android, Windows, and iOS, you can actually deploy hybrid apps into those native emulators, which I think is awesome, because I mean, you're getting the closest possible emulation you can without actually having a device. But I mean, as we all know, once you are ready to ship your app, you really want to do some on-device testing, right? So, TJ, where are we with device deployments?
Just in terms of getting your app to your device, that sort of thing? Yeah, this is something where the AppBuilder has done a lot, and some other tools have done a lot too to make this sort of thing easier. I mean, one of the biggest pain points just logistically right away is that if you're doing iOS dev on Windows, you've got a problem right there because you're going to have trouble building iOS apps because you need Xcode. And the flip side is also true, in that if you want to build Windows Phone apps on a Mac, you're going to have trouble because the Windows Phone SDK only runs in Windows. So regardless of your operating system of choice, if you want to do the three-platform thing, even for a Cordova app or a cross-platform or something like Xamarin or NativeScript, like you've automatically got a problem right there. And so things like AppBuilder and making these cloud builds available, making it possible to say like AppBuilder build WP8 and just get a Windows Phone XAP file on a Mac is pretty powerful. Yeah. And PhoneGap Build does that sort of thing a little bit too, and I think we're starting to see some other tools made available to make that sort of thing as easy as possible. And I mean also like deployment tools as well. So we have things like App Manager and the Telerik platform to help you distribute apps to things like beta testers, and some of these things are starting to be natively made available. Like Michael might be able to speak about like iOS and TestFlight and that sort of thing as well to help you distribute apps as well.
Yeah, and just recently, well, actually, we announced at the latest Apple's conference, WWDC, TestFlight is now owned by Apple. So that's also another way that you can get iOS applications, maybe in debug mode, so to speak, onto your device.
Yeah, and it won't. Just to be clear, like TestFlight won't help you build your apps. It's just I have my completed app and I want to
distribute it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I think Michael and I have dealt with a lot. I mean, we have both been building like Windows native apps, and Michael is smart enough to do iOS and Android, which I find really hard for a single guy to do. But he's smart. So, like, we are used to like plugging in our phones with a USB and deploying a ZAP file or an APK or the iOS file. The thing where you can just simply have these companion apps which will run your hybrid apps inside of a shell, and all you have to do is like get around all of the provisioning things for Windows Phone or iOS and just simply like scan a QR code and deploy your app. That is just awesome to me. That's very developer friendly.
It's so massive. I mean, because for example, at hackathons and other places that I've been, most so for Apple they want $99 to deploy an IPA onto your device. Windows wants $19, and with Android, obviously, you can do it for free if you enable your developer tools and USB debugging. But when I've seen the look, and I have some pictures of people that have actually run their app for the first time and seen it on a mobile app without provisioning, without paying, a dime for iOS, that was kind of the turning point where they were like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be successful with this. I don't have to figure out. And I remember the provisioning profiles in the earlier versions of like Xcode 4, how absolutely painful it was just to even set up a team, much less get the IPA onto your phone. So the app, the companion app that we have, is just amazing.
And I think the other big advantage is, and this is for developers, like as we get into quickly building our apps and like doing iterations, since all of these things are cloud built, like we know exactly which files you have changed. So you don't have to do the whole build and deploy. You can just simply save a file and it shows up. It's something we call live sync within AppBuilder. And I think, TJ even speak to this. I think this is a great place for app developers to be quickly debugging your apps as you're going.
Yeah, and we haven't talked much about NativeScript yet, but did you guys know NativeScript even has that ability built into it as well? Like that?
No, that's nice.
Yeah, because so what Sam's referring to, like live sync is basically you're developing a hybrid app and you change your index.html because you don't like your red background and you want your blue background. Well, you don't want to build you don't want to go out and build that thing again. You don't need to generate a new APK. And live sync is basically an intelligent way of just transferring those files over to your app through a USB connection so that your app you can set it up to automatically refresh as you make changes. So it kind of shortens that feedback cycle between you changing your code and actually seeing the results. And you can hook up multiple devices at once.
Yeah.
And for NativeScript, I think this is actually pretty cool because we haven't talked about NativeScript much, but Sam mentioned it before. It's kind of in this layer between native and hybrid because you're writing JavaScript code, but that JavaScript code is actually running natively. Like whereas Cordova spins up a web view and you're running basically in a browser instance, that's not happening in NativeScript. Instead, NativeScript is using the JavaScript bridge that all of these different platforms have. Like iOS, Android, Windows Phone, they all have a way of saying transfer JavaScript code basically into native code, and NativeScript just basically leverages that. And so that makes the same live sync ability actually available when you're running in one of these companion apps. So companion app is open on your device. You're looking at your Android app, your native Android app. You click Save in your NativeScript project, and you can actually get that live sync ability so that you can see the changes on your device.
Yeah. And I think NativeScript is going to also appeal to another audience, which is the Microsoft developer that's familiar with XAML. Especially the UI is an XML file for NativeScript, but there's a lot of things that are similar, like grid.row, grid.height, and some of the things that XAML developers have already been working with and they've been using. I think they'll find that is pleasantly easy to get into building those apps.
Okay, so let me back up a step here, guys, and maybe help me understand. So the way I understand NativeScript, and I know we have been working on this, it is nothing proprietary. It is going to be open sourced, and all we are doing is making JavaScript apps run on every platform. So help me understand how this is going to work. We are going to offer a UI which is abstracted away. So if I say, here's a stack panel in my mobile app which is going to have a list box, and here's my data, go hook it up to the data, which is, I think, what Michael is referring to. XAML developers in particular are going to love the data binding. The fact that you can do data binding in a cross-platform way is going to be awesome. So when I say, here's my data, go show this in a list box, how does that work? I mean, are we creating native list boxes on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone?
Yeah, so to answer that, let me start by giving a concrete example here. So I'm going to share my screen here. And so this is a tiny little app I was working on. And so this is a NativeScript. This is a XML file. This app is actually for just managing grocery lists. So that's the list.xml. And what I love about NativeScript is just how easy this code is to read. Like, you can get a pretty good sense of what's going on here just by looking at it. Like, there's a page, There's a grid panel within the page. There's two real core elements here. There's a button that actually adds to the list, and then the list itself. And then this definition that just defines how there's two rows in here. This is just saying the first row takes basically an automatic height for what's in it, and then the rest of the row takes everything else. But again, this is very readable, but the data binding syntax you're talking about happens right here. And so I'm saying behind the scenes, and actually I could go show it, but that groceries binding there comes into play because I say you set the binding context, or basically you set an object that says this is like the data or the object that this page is bound to, and that page data comes from here. So basically you're dealing with an array. Right. And so what NativeScript does is it'll say, okay, that is bound to that array, so when that array changes, I need to update my view automatically. It's two-way data binding. So that when I get groceries, which is what this is doing right here, I can say when it's done, all I really have to do is push the groceries into that list, and there's no code in here that says re-render my list or anything. It just knows, oh, there's a new grocery, let me display it. And to answer your other question about how this works, like the crux of this is kind of revolves around these modules. So there's this HTTP module, for instance, under basically this is what requires it. And as part of this project, there are cross-platform implementations of this to basically make this work in iOS, Android, and soon to be Windows Phone as well. So I think I can actually show that because
I already love this because you're writing pure JavaScript. Because I mean, this is nothing proprietary, right? This is pure ECMAScript, JavaScript, and we're able to do data binding on a abstracted UI layer, which works on every platform. This is awesome.
Yep, and so here's the implementation. So here's HTTP request.ios.js, and you can see like this is using this is leveraging that bridge. So it gives you the ability, like NativeScript has as part of it, this way of transferring APIs, like basically making the native APIs work in JavaScript, which makes it possible to write this. Like you can write this stuff directly. You don't need to write a Cordova plugin to write this. You could just hand in JavaScript, put yourself in a .ios file and say, hey, I need to get at NSURL session configuration, and you can just do it.
Nice.
And so, I mean, yes, it takes a bit of code to implement the code or implement the logic you need to do a JSON call, but it's not bad.
Right. And I mean, to what you're saying, I mean, this is something like .NET developers are used to. We use this thing called the iNotify property change, which is our way of knowing here's a UI that's bound to a data collection. If anything changes in the underlying object, go ahead and update the UI, do the firing of the event. And I think web developers are used to observables, be it in Kendo UI, be it in just regular JavaScript. So you're saying if you bound your UI to these observables, it's a two-way data binding.
It is, yep. And from a web development perspective, like there's some things, the core logic is JavaScript, and it's not like souped-up proprietary JavaScript. I mean, it's JavaScript. It's running on V8 on Android devices. It's running on Apple calls it, I think it's WebKit Core on iOS devices. So it's pure JavaScript you're writing, and you just have to kind of learn. Like from a web developer's perspective, getting used to the XML takes a little bit of time. It's kind of like because I've never done XAML before.
So this is where XAML developers just come in flying.
Yeah. Exactly. That screen, the first screen that you showed, you know, that had the view, that screen, I looked through that page, and besides the case on a couple of things, it was identical to what a XAML developer would be doing.
Yep. Yeah, and I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, go
on. I was just going to say, and I think that kind of NativeScript helps bridge that world. Like I think developers coming, it's pretty readable code, and it's a really attractive way to kind of get into native development because, for instance, when I first started playing with NativeScript, I wanted to show an iOS alert, and there's a NativeScript module for doing that sort of thing, but I just want to call the iOS API, right? And I do zero iOS development, so I could I could not spin up for you in Xcode a project that does this. But I was able to read the API docs for iOS, find the APIs, and it took a couple minutes of fidgeting around to figure out how like the Objective-C to JavaScript conversions worked. But in about 5 to 10 minutes, I had an alert on iOS.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
And
cool.
And I think the other nice thing with the UI is, I mean, there is one thing about XML being good to contain your UI pieces and kind of build it up in a visual tree, but styling of your UI, right? So that's where I like having CSS, just simple, which is generic CSS that I can get my chops out and be able to style my app exactly the way I want for every device, right? So I like that. Now, I know, TJ, we are talking to folks, we're kind of running out of time. Let me ask one question. I know Michael loves his native stuff. So, and he's apparently the only one who's smart enough to do Xcode and
No,
iOS.
no. Everybody here is smart people.
So, I hear about Objective-C, and Apple came out at WWDC and talked about Swift. Where do we stand? Like, which one do we do? Do we do both? Is there like a transition? What's the story?
Yeah, so I was actually at Apple's conference when they first announced Swift, and I think I've told TJ this story, or he may have heard me telling somebody it, but I checked my Twitter feed, and immediately I heard all this, hey, I've successfully avoided Objective-C. And, I mean, and it was like, yes, and like, I've done it. And then there was some pictures, and I actually saved one of the pictures of a guy who took his Objective-C book and threw it in the garbage can. And I actually used that picture in a presentation at M3 conference in Columbus. And so, and then others that had already been developing iOS apps. And so with iOS, obviously, if you're using Objective-C, those apps that you're writing are not just for iPhone and iPad, they're for Mac as well. That's how you write a Mac application, is Objective-C. The first thing that I saw that team kind of start tweeting was, hey, great, we've got a new language to learn, being sarcastic, I really don't want to learn anything else. I think Objective-C does everything it needs to do. But it basically breaks down to this, and this is the easiest way that I can break it down, is that you're going to have a very hard time if you're writing an iOS app without at least knowing some of the basics of Objective-C. And the community right now is one of the biggest things that I can push on, is that they are going to speak about Objective-C. So if you have a project, you have a brand new Swift project, and chances are you're going to have a problem. And when you have that problem, you're going to do a search. And I wrote in an article before, one of the more common problems that people have is working with the table view. And I did a couple of searches of table view, section empty. And there's millions of answers of reasons why that could happen. The Stack Overflow links, and all of the answers that I found were in Objective-C. So automatically that kind of goes back to, hey, the iOS community still speaks the Objective-C language. Besides that, there's this wide range of frameworks that have already been built that you want to use. Obviously, you can still use them. You can create a bridge, and I did a tweet about one of the bridges that you could create if you're using our native iOS controls. The bridge is very simple to create. It's basically just your header file and an implementation file. That's another thing to keep in mind. But one of another point that I wanted to make was that all of this legacy code that's been already written in Objective-C is going to be, it's going to need to be maintained and updated, because remember, before iOS 8, all of those apps that's in the App Store, and Apple's very proud to tell you how many apps that they have. Every app was written in Objective-C, and those apps, your Walgreens apps, and your CVS and these other companies, if they want to start building and extending and doing some other things, and they want this in Swift. That, you know, 'cause Swift has a lot of performance. It offers type safety and a couple of other things. That person that they hire to come in to update that app has still got to know has to know Objective-C. And finally, I would probably say that you know, it's going to take a while for Swift to actually have a wide stream adoption. But we've seen this, you know, in the past with ARC, which was automatic reference counting. There was actually a checkbox, I remember, that was in Xcode, and you would actually check it to use it, and basically that helps with some memory. And then there was auto layout. And both of those things, it took a long time for people to actually start using them, and then for Apple to finally just say, you know what, forget it, you're going to start using this, and here's how we're going to force you to use this. We're going to remove some of the stuff from the wizards. In all of our presentations, we're going to be using auto layout, and we're going to, you know, go full force with here's how you should do this. But yeah, it kind of goes back to Swift is still early, and it's still in those early stages. And even in the 1.0, I can crash the latest Playgrounds, which is a part of Xcode. I can crash that pretty easily using Swift, because that's the language that it uses there. So it's going to take you know, some time before Swift is widely accepted.
Yeah, and I ran into that myself even when I was, that same alert example, when I was looking things up. Well, I found a bunch of stuff in Objective-C. So that's what I ended up having to try to decipher through. So.
Good to know. So, see, guys, I mean, we have been talking for close to an hour, and I think we are back exactly where we started, right? There is no single way of doing it. I mean, it's good to know the pros and cons, and I mean, I think every developer, be it indie, you're trying to hit your biggest audience possible, or be it an enterprise who's trying to figure out their mobile strategy, it's good to do these pros and cons weighing and figure out what's your strategy moving forward, so you can have some sanity in your code base, as well as try to hit as much of your audience as you can. And I mean, moving forward, I think if we look into 2015 and beyond, I think we are talking more about not just like mobile experiences, kind of, but human-centered experiences. And things are evolving, as we know, like wearables. Everybody has a wearable. Be it a watch, be it something else, and the Internet of Things is catching up in a big way. This is where everything has an IP address. My fridge can talk to my microwave, which is awesome.
It can tweet for you.
Yeah,
it can tweet for you.
Yeah, so I think we'll see this evolving.
Your fridge, can your fridge seriously tweet?
Yes.
No, not yet.
No, yes it can. Yes it can. There is a refrigerator that I have well, at least I've heard about, that out of the box it offers Facebook and tweets on the panel, on a little LED panel on the screen.
So I think, I mean, we are scratching the surface here. We'll see. I mean, I think a lot of the wearable stuff, because they're coming out from individual companies like Samsung or the Microsofts or the Apples, the Apple Watches out. Microsoft and Google both have lots and lots of in-hand wearables. So I think a lot of that wearable development is going to be native for now, and then we are starting to make the cross-platform pitches. I think with a lot of the IoT stuff, yes, you can do native, but you can also do JavaScript to make it kind of web-friendly and cross-platform. So I think we're going to be keeping the evolving going for a while in the mobile space.
And one of the things I found that was kind of interesting is that I've actually found that there is a person by the name of Trent Gardner who had created an Android Wear plugin for Cordova. And I have just a GitHub link that obviously we can share at the end of this. But if you just search for Trent Gardner Android Wear Cordova plugin, you'll see he's already kind of bridging the gap for Cordova users that want to target Android. Obviously, for Apple, the watch has not been released yet. There is a native SDK out, and Microsoft really just has the band, and there's not even an SDK out yet.
It's coming.
There should be one. Yeah, there should be one coming very, very soon. And Pebble's the only other watch that I know of that offers a JavaScript SDK as well as a native SDK. So we have some really awesome stuff coming.
Yeah, and lots of choices for developers, which is a good thing.
Very cool. All right, I am going to wrap things up there because we're coming out. We're over 50 minutes now. I do want to make sure we had one question submitted that I want to make sure we get to. The question was from Caven. He did not provide a last name, but the question is, I have a question in which after I successfully build an APK, when I unzip the APK, the source file or the source code gets extracted and wants to know if there's any solutions to that. So I think what Kaven's referring to is when you're building a hybrid or a Cordova app, you're building with web text, so there's really no compilation step in terms of the actual JavaScript, HTML, and CSS code. It's just sitting there, basically as is, as you coded it. It doesn't get built as you would with Objective-C, Java, C# code that goes in the native apps. And so I thought I'd point at a few different resources. The simple thing you can do is just minify and obfuscate your JavaScript. So run it through something like Uglify, or there's a whole bunch of JavaScript minifiers that are sitting out there. You could run that through, create some sort of build step before you do the actual release build of your app. And that does a pretty good job. I mean, you make your code not easily copyable, not easily readable, not human readable. So at the very least, it makes them take a lot more effort in order to see the contents of your app. The other resource I'll point at is JS Scrambler. Let me share my screen here. This is one I heard of just recently. This kind of takes that to the next level. It basically takes your code, it obfuscates it, but then it also does some things where it kind of juggles it around, so that it's not something that anyone could just take and copy and paste. It adds a little extra layer to make that sort of thing, to make it a little more secure. Do you guys know of any other strategies for dealing with this sort of thing?
No, I think that's pretty much the ones that I've heard of.
I mean, there's a lot on the native side of things. I mean, there are obfuscators all over the place, but I mean, hybrid, yeah, I think the ones that you were talking about.
Do native ones, is that a big thing in the native world, iOS, Android, like securing your bytecode, or?
So they do it, but the thing about it is that pretty much from the security talks that I have seen, there's really no way to obfuscate code. I mean, all that's going to do is stop your junior hackers. The people that really want into your app, there's so many methods. It goes from everything, C# code. There's been a million people that have created ways to decompile that code. Java is another one that's just been hammered. And then Objective-C is kind of the same way. I've seen a security talk on iOS, and just the data that iOS collects, like your phone keeps and stores every location that you've been at, without telling you that. But it obviously you can go in and you can grab the actual applications and do whatever you want with them. So there's really no such thing as obfuscation.
I mean, you can try. So I think the big thing I try doing myself is, yes, your code is going to be out and unzipped when it's running on a device. Like especially on Windows, it was a huge risk, because if you had like a Windows RT app, your code is just out there running, like just lying on a file drive on the user's computer. So the big caveat there is do not put anything in your code base locally on the client side which is identifiable and that could be misused. So if you have like an Azure key, or if you have like a Telerik backend services key, try bringing that key down from a web service call and not just have it out on the client side.
Yeah, that's actually good advice. I should have mentioned that. Like, it's the same holds true in a Cordova app. If you have something proprietary, you have something that you're concerned for people actually stealing from you, just put it in your backend and just make it available as a service, an authenticated service, so that it's just not distributed with the app itself.
Yeah, and I think authenticated is kind of the key word there, because we all remember when Flappy Birds came out. Several people found and got the code to that, and they found where he was storing that, and then they changed their high score to, like, 9 million whatever flaps. I mean, it was something crazy. But I mean, that's the thing. People are going to be digging into your code, and those secure parts make sure there's some sort of authentication layer out there.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, Kaven, for submitting that question. If you haven't watched Office Hours before, we have a way let me switch here. A way that you can submit questions to hear them answered live on the air. We actually have on our developer portal here, developer.telerik.com, this new community section. We had this really nice new design done to this. So you should check this out. We have things like user group supports. You can find information on our developer expert program, our featured app program. And for office hours, we have a little section here that you can go to find recordings of previous events. And you can also use it to submit questions if you want to hear your question answered on the next episode. So I think that's all we have today. We're pretty much exactly at an hour. So thanks everybody again for joining us. Thanks Sam and Michael for the discussion. As I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time. So.
All right, our pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, it was very fun.
All right.